An 11-year-old boy, forced to live on the streets, gathered his courage and entered a luxury restaurant to ask for something to eat. The owner's reaction left everyone speechless. Evening was falling over the city, and the streets filled with shadows and flickering lights. Among the hurried passers-by, an 11-year-old boy wandered alone, with one hand resting on his empty stomach that growled with hunger. His name was Marco, and he had no memories of a stable home or a family. The freezing nights were always the worst, and that one seemed like one of the coldest he had ever faced. Barefoot and wearing worn-out clothes, Marco walked staring at the illuminated restaurants, from which came the inviting aroma of hot dishes. He had spent the entire day desperately searching for something to eat. His feet were marked by fatigue, and his face reflected deep weariness mixed with desperation. When his eyes met an elegant restaurant at the corner of the street, a glimmer of hope lit up his gaze. He had never been in such a refined place, where diners wore impeccable clothes and the dishes seemed straight out of a magazine. But hunger was stronger than fear. Hesitantly, Marco approached the entrance. The doorman, a tall man with a cold and stern expression, immediately blocked him with his gaze. "Hey boy, what do you think you're doing here?" he asked, crossing his arms with an air of superiority. Marco, with a low and trembling voice, replied, "I'm hungry, sir. Could you give me something to eat?" The doorman laughed disdainfully, shaking his head. "This isn't a place for you, go away." But Marco didn't move. Through the open door, he could see the laden tables and hear the cheerful laughter of the customers. He had nothing to lose, so, gathering all the courage he had, he ignored the doorman and slipped into the restaurant. Inside, the guests began to murmur, surprised by the presence of a barefoot and dirty little boy in such an exclusive place. Marco sat at an empty table, hoping someone would notice him and speak to him. A waitress, a young woman named Julia, approached cautiously, trying to understand what was happening. "Little one, are you lost?" she asked with a sweet voice, but full of apprehension. Marco looked at her with eyes full of sadness. "I'd just like something to eat, please. I'm really very hungry." Julia felt her heart tighten. She knew she couldn't ignore that request, even though the restaurant owner, Stefano, was famous for not tolerating such situations in his establishment. Taking a quick glance toward the kitchen, where Stefano was talking with the staff, Julia made a decision. "Wait here. I'll be right back," she told him, heading to the kitchen to get a plate of food. Meanwhile, the customers didn't take their eyes off Marco. Some observed him with pity, others with expressions of annoyance and contempt. Julia returned with a steaming plate of spaghetti and gently placed it in front of the boy. "Eat slowly, okay?" she advised with a kind smile. Marco began to devour the meal enthusiastically, but he hadn't yet taken his third bite when an authoritative voice resounded throughout the entire restaurant. "What's happening here?" It was Stefano, the restaurant owner, a man in his 50s with an imposing figure and a firm gaze. He approached with determined steps to the table where Marco was seated, observing him with a mixture of curiosity and irritation. "Who allowed this boy to enter?" Stefano asked, his sharp tone bringing silence among those present. Julia, visibly nervous, approached her boss. "I'm sorry, sir. This boy was hungry. I thought we could help him by giving him something to eat." Stefano stared at Marco for a long moment. The atmosphere in the restaurant was charged with tension. Everyone waited for his reaction. After a few moments, Stefano sighed and crouched beside Marco, trying to establish eye contact. "What's your name, boy?" he asked, surprisingly with a warmer voice than expected. Marco replied timidly with a thread of voice. Stefano, against all expectations, gave him a smile no one had ever seen from him. "Marco, do you like spaghetti?" he asked. Marco nodded with an expression of disbelief on his face. "Then finish eating, my boy. Afterward we'll talk." The room filled with surprised murmurs. No one expected such an attitude from the stern restaurant owner. While Marco finished his meal, Stefano walked away and returned to the kitchen. Julia and the other employees looked at each other in amazement. Stefano was famous for his rigidity and maniacal precision, No one had ever seen him so understanding and kind. Once Marco had finished eating, Stefano returned to the table. The boy watched him with gratitude, but also with slight fear for what would happen. "Do you have a place to go, Marco?" he asked, sitting beside him. Marco shook his head, his eyes directed toward the floor. "No, sir. I live on the street. I don't have a home or a family." Stefano remained thoughtful, carefully weighing those words. He stood up slowly and motioned for the boy to follow him. They crossed the restaurant together, passing through the kitchen, to a small office in the back. "Sit down, Marco," Stefano said, indicating an old worn leather chair. Marco sat down, confused, while Stefano observed him for a moment. Then he began to speak, his voice filled with emotion. "You know, I also grew up in a situation similar to yours, Marco. My parents died when I was very young, and I had to learn to survive on my own, on the street. One day, a man saw me while I was desperately looking for something to eat and decided to help me. He taught me to cook and offered me a job. Thanks to him, my life changed completely." Marco listened to Stefano's words, his eyes wide with surprise. He would never have imagined that someone like Stefano had lived through difficulties similar to his. "I know how hard it is to live on the street, and no child should face such a thing," Stefano continued, his gaze determined and full of compassion. "Therefore, from today, you'll work here in the restaurant. You'll have a bed to sleep in and food to eat. What do you say?" Marco felt a wave of emotions overwhelm him. He couldn't believe his ears. Tears streaked his face, but for the first time they were tears of happiness. "Thank you, sir. I promise to work hard," Marco replied with his voice trembling with emotion. Stefano placed a hand on his shoulder with a paternal smile. "I know you will, Marco. Now we'll take care of you. The first thing to do is a good bath and find you some clean clothes." He called Julia, who entered the office with a warm smile. Stefano briefly explained the situation to her, and she immediately agreed to help. "Come on, Marco. You'll see you'll feel like a new person," Julia said, accompanying him out of the office. While Julia took care of settling Marco in, Stefano made some phone calls. He knew the boy's journey would be long and full of challenges, but he was determined to offer him the same opportunity he himself had received years before. Later that evening, Marco reappeared in the restaurant dining room, washed and dressed in clean clothes. The remaining customers couldn't help but notice the change. Julia and the rest of the staff were moved seeing how transformed the boy was. Stefano called Marco to the kitchen. "So, young man, are you ready to begin?" he asked with an encouraging smile. Marco nodded energetically, eager to prove his worth. Stefano introduced Marco to the rest of the staff, explaining that he would start with the simplest tasks and, over time, would learn everything needed to work in the kitchen. Marco's first assignment was washing dishes. Although it was a humble task, he tackled it with enthusiasm and dedication that immediately won everyone's sympathy. Stefano watched the boy carefully, admiring his determination and desire to do well. At the end of the shift, he called Marco to his office again. "You did an excellent job today, Marco. I'm proud of you," Stefano said, handing him a key. "This is for a small room at the back of the restaurant. It's simple, but now it's yours. Consider it your new refuge. Now you have a place you can call home." Marco took the key with trembling hands, feeling a warmth in his chest he hadn't felt for a long time. He thanked Stefano once more, unable to find words to express all his gratitude. "Go rest, Marco. Tomorrow will be a new day, and we'll have a lot to do," Stefano said, saying goodbye with an affectionate embrace. As Marco headed toward his new room, he couldn't stop reflecting on how his life had changed in a single day. Stefano's generosity had restored his hope, and Marco was determined to make the most of this opportunity. The future was still full of uncertainties, but now he knew that with Stefano by his side he could face any difficulty. Thus, the little boy who had entered a restaurant with an empty stomach found not only a meal, but a new family. Days passed and Marco quickly got used to his new routine. Every morning he woke up early to help prepare the dining room for customers. Stefano and Julia became reference figures for him, teaching him everything about life and work with patience and affection. Marco didn't limit himself to washing dishes. He soon learned to cut vegetables precisely, to prepare sauces, and even to decorate plates creatively. His curiosity and eagerness to learn impressed everyone, but it was Stefano who saw in him a reflection of his younger self. One day, the restaurant was particularly crowded. An important event was being held, and Stefano was visibly tense about ensuring everything went perfectly. Marco, despite his young age and small stature, was determined to give his best to contribute. While the restaurant bustled with activity, Marco moved quickly and focused. He brought ingredients to the chefs, washed utensils, and, when needed, also helped serve dishes to customers. His energy and dedication captured the attention of many guests. During dinner, an elegant and austere-looking man entered the restaurant. He was a famous food critic, known for his ruthless but influential reviews. When Stefano saw him, a shiver ran through his spine. A good review could further elevate the restaurant's prestige, but a negative criticism would be a heavy blow. The man sat at a central table, observing every detail with meticulous attention. When Marco passed near him, the critic followed him with his gaze, visibly intrigued by the young boy's presence in the restaurant. Julia approached the critic with the menu in hand, smiling professionally. "Good evening, sir. May I recommend today's special?" she proposed, trying to mask her own nervousness. The man nodded, but continued to keep an eye on Marco, who, at that moment, was helping prepare a dessert in the open kitchen. Julia placed the order, and the kitchen immediately went on high alert to prepare the dish perfectly. Marco, noticing the agitation, asked Stefano curiously who that man was. "He's a very important critic, Marco. His opinion could have a big impact on our restaurant," Stefano explained, trying to maintain a calm tone, although a certain concern was evident in his eyes. Marco reflected for a moment, then smiled. "Then we need to give our best, right?" Stefano burst into laughter and ruffled his hair. "Exactly, Marco. Let's show him what we're capable of." When the dish was finally served to the critic, a silence charged with tension enveloped the kitchen. Everyone watched from afar, waiting for his reaction. The man tasted every component of the dish with extreme care, maintaining an inscrutable expression. The minutes seemed to transform into an eternity before the critic motioned to Julia, indicating he wanted to speak with the chef. Stefano approached the table, maintaining a professional smile, although he was visibly tense. Marco, meanwhile, peeked from the kitchen, with eyes wide with expectation. "So, what do you think of our dish, sir?" Stefano asked in a measured tone. The critic observed Stefano for a moment, then rested his gaze on Marco, who was watching him timidly from the kitchen door. "The food was excellent," the critic said, "but what impressed me most is the atmosphere of this place," he added, pointing to Marco. "This young boy, does he work here?" Stefano nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and relief. "Yes, his name is Marco. He's been learning with us for a few weeks." A rare smile appeared on the critic's face. "He has great potential. And, more than that, he's brought a unique energy to this restaurant." Then he stood up, approaching Marco. He extended his hand, and the boy, somewhat hesitant, came forward to shake it. "Keep it up, boy. You have a bright future ahead of you." Marco, with eyes shining with emotion, replied, "Thank you, sir." After the critic left the restaurant, Stefano returned to the kitchen, where the staff was already celebrating discreetly. He knelt beside Marco and placed his hands on his shoulders. "You were extraordinary today, Marco. I'm really proud of you." Julia joined them, embracing the boy warmly. "I knew you had something special, dear. We're all happy to have you with us." Marco smiled, finally feeling part of a real family. He knew he still had so much to learn and many challenges to face, but with Stefano, Julia, and the rest of the team by his side, he felt he could overcome anything. The evening concluded with everyone at the restaurant in a climate of joy, celebrating not only the evening's success, but also the hope Marco had brought into their lives. The boy who had once entered a luxury restaurant hungry had found his place in the world. And that was only the beginning of his journey. Every day at the restaurant represented a new opportunity for Marco to grow and learn, and he was determined to make the most of every moment. With Stefano and Julia's support, His future seemed brighter than he had ever dared imagine. As time passed, Marco became an indispensable presence in the restaurant. His dedication and enthusiasm were contagious, and soon he was no longer just an apprentice, but a true member of the restaurant family. Stefano and Giulia treated him like a son, guiding him and caring for him with genuine affection. One morning, while the restaurant was still closed and the staff began preparations for the day, Stefano called Marco to his office for a private conversation. "Marco, I need to talk to you about something important," Stefano began, with a serious but kind expression. "You're learning a lot here and you're making incredible progress, but you're still a boy and you need a formal education." Marco frowned, uncertain where Stefano was going. "I spoke with Giulia, and we've decided it's time for you to go to school," Stefano continued. "We'll enroll you in a school nearby and help you organize yourself to have time both for studying and for working. I want you to have all the opportunities one didn't have when I was young." Marco felt conflicting emotions. He loved working at the restaurant and learning everything about cooking, but he knew how important education was. With a timid smile, he nodded. "Thank you, Stefano. I promise I'll study hard and give my best." Stefano hugged him affectionately, feeling incredibly proud of the boy he had taken under his wing. "I know you will, Marco, and we'll always be here to support you, whatever happens." That evening, Giulia accompanied Marco to the school to complete the enrollment. The principal, a warm and kind woman named Donna Maria, welcomed Marco with a smile. "Welcome, Marco. We're happy to have you here with us," she said, shaking his hand. "I'm certain you'll make many friends and discover many new things." Marco started school the next day. At first, it was difficult to adapt to that environment so different from the restaurant, where he felt safe and surrounded by affection. But he soon found his rhythm and over time made new friends. Meanwhile, at the restaurant, everyone missed him during the day. Giulia often found herself looking at the clock, waiting for the moment when Marco would arrive from school, full of stories to tell. Even Stefano, while knowing he had made the right decision, felt a void without the young man by his side in the kitchen. One afternoon, Marco returned to the restaurant with eyes shining with enthusiasm. "Stefano, Giulia, guess what? Today at school we talked about what we want to be when we grow up, and I told them about you, about the restaurant, and about my dream of becoming a great chef." Stefano and Giulia exchanged a glance full of emotion. Marco's dedication and enthusiasm for the restaurant were evident. "And you know something?" Marco continued with eyes full of enthusiasm. "Some of my classmates said they'd like to come here to see the restaurant one day." Stefano smiled, deeply touched. "That's fantastic, Marco. We're really proud of you. And of course your friends will always be welcome here." Weeks turned into months, and Marco's life followed a harmonious rhythm between school and work at the restaurant. He continued to grow and learn, both in study and in the kitchen. Stefano and Giulia offered him constant guidance and support, helping him overcome every challenge. One day, however, something unexpected happened. Marco was at school when an unknown woman appeared at the restaurant entrance. She was young, dressed simply but neatly, and her eyes betrayed a combination of anxiety and hope. Giulia welcomed her with a professional smile, although she couldn't hide a certain curiosity. "Good afternoon, may I help you?" The woman took a deep breath before answering. "My name is Anna. I'm looking for my son. He disappeared several months ago and they told me he might be here working with you. His name is Marco." Giulia was speechless for a moment. Marco's story had always been a mystery, and now, suddenly, his biological mother was there, looking for him. Stefano, who was in the kitchen, sensed the tense climate and approached to understand what was happening. "Giulia, everything okay? What's going on?" he asked. Giulia explained the situation to Stefano, who was equally surprised. He looked at Anna carefully, trying to assess the woman's sincerity. "Marco is at school right now, but he should be back shortly," Stefano said. "Please have a seat. Let's wait for him to arrive, so we can clarify everything." Anna nodded, visibly nervous, and sat at one of the restaurant tables. While they waited, Stefano and Giulia retreated to the kitchen to discuss. They knew that if Anna really was Marco's mother, the boy's life would change profoundly. When Marco finally returned from school, he immediately sensed the unusual atmosphere. Stefano and Giulia took him to the office and explained the situation. Marco remained shocked, unable to formulate a clear thought. "My mother? But I don't remember her," he said, with a confused expression. Stefano placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Let's go talk to her together, Marco. If she really is your mother, we need to understand what happened and what to do from now on." They returned to the dining room, where Anna waited with evident anxiety. When she saw Marco, her eyes filled with tears.
Marco?
"It's me, your mother?" Anna said, with a trembling voice full of emotion. Marco looked at the woman, trying to remember something. He felt a whirlwind of emotions inside, but couldn't find the words. The presence of Stefano and Giulia by his side gave him strength. "Hello," was all Marco could say. Anna stood up, taking a step toward him, but stopped immediately, respecting his space. "I've been looking for you for so long," Anna began, with a trembling voice. "I was forced to leave you with your aunt because I was very ill. When I came back, she told me you had disappeared. I was desperate, but I never stopped looking for you." Marco looked at Stefano and Giulia, seeking guidance in their eyes. Stefano gave him a nod of assent, encouraging him to speak. "I don't remember much," Marco admitted, his voice full of uncertainty. "But I'm fine now with Stefano and Giulia. They took care of me when I had no one." Anna smiled through her tears. "I know, and I'll never stop thanking them for that. But I'm your mother, Marco, and I want to be part of your life again." Marco felt an internal conflict growing inside him. He felt great affection for Stefano and Giulia, but also felt a connection with Anna, although it was a distant and confused memory. After a moment of silence, he turned to Stefano. "What should I do?" he asked with a trembling voice. Stefano knelt beside him and placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "This decision is yours alone, Marco. We'll always be here for you, whatever you choose. But I think you should give your mother a chance. Get to know her better and listen to her story." Marco nodded, feeling a bit more secure. "Okay, I want to get to know you better, Mom." Anna smiled, with tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, sweetheart. I'll do my best to make up for lost time." From that day, Marco's life changed once again. He began spending time with Anna, discovering his past and building a new bond with her. However, he continued to return to the restaurant, where he knew he had a family that loved him unconditionally and supported him in every situation. Marco's story was a tale of resilience and love, a demonstration of how, despite difficulties, there are always people ready to guide and protect you. Thus, the boy who one day had entered an elegant restaurant with hunger in his heart had found not only a meal, but also multiple families and a future full of hope. Over time, the relationship between Marco and Anna began to flourish. They met regularly, and each meeting revealed new memories and details that helped rebuild the lost bond. Anna, despite still carrying the scars of the past, was determined to be the mother Marco deserved. Meanwhile, at the restaurant, Marco continued to be a beloved and indispensable presence, a symbol of growth and new hope. Stefano and Giulia watched with pride as Marco managed to balance school, work at the restaurant, and time spent with Anna. Every day, Marco showed more and more talent and passion for cooking, and Stefano was certain the boy had a brilliant future ahead of him. One evening, the restaurant was exceptionally crowded for a special event, a charity gala organized by Stefano to raise funds for a shelter for children in difficulty. It was a cause particularly close to his heart, especially since he had met Marco. The event was an opportunity to showcase his team's work and, especially, to highlight Marco. Marco was busy in the kitchen, helping prepare dishes for the evening. He wore a white apron, which seemed almost too big for his slender body, but he wore it with pride. Stefano watched him from afar, remembering the shy and bewildered little boy who had entered the restaurant months before. Giulia entered the kitchen, visibly excited. "Marco, are you ready to help serve?" she asked.
Marco nodded enthusiastically.
"Of course, Giulia." With the dishes ready to be served, Marco followed the others into the dining room, delivering courses and talking with guests. He moved with a confidence that amazed everyone who saw him. Customers smiled, fascinated by his determination and inspired by his story. Anna, present at the event, watched Marco from afar with a smile full of pride. She approached Stefano, who was carefully supervising the event. "He's doing an incredible job," Anna said, her eyes shining with emotion. Stefano nodded without taking his eyes off Marco. "He has natural talent and rare dedication. You must be very proud." Anna smiled, feeling closer to her son every day. "I am, and I can't stop thanking you and Julia for everything you've done for him." Stefano turned to Anna, looking her in the eyes. "We're all in this together. Marco is part of our family now." The evening concluded with resounding success, and when the event came to an end, Stefano called the guests' attention for a special announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, good evening everyone," he began, holding a microphone. "I'd like to thank you for being here tonight and for supporting such an important cause. I also take this opportunity to tell you a story that is very special to us here at the restaurant." The guests fell silent, curious. "A few months ago, a young boy entered our restaurant. He was hungry and alone. His name is Marco." Stefano motioned for Marco to approach. "Since that day, Marco has become a source of inspiration for all of us. He's shown us the true meaning of resilience and courage." Then Stefano smiled and added, "Tonight I'm honored to announce that Marco officially becomes part of our team, not as a helper, but as an apprentice chef." Warm applause filled the room as Marco approached, his face flushed with emotion. Stefano passed him the microphone and the boy looked at the audience with a timid but confident smile. "Thank you, everyone," he said, with a trembling but sincere voice. "I'm really happy to be here and to be part of this family. I promise to continue working hard, to learn and to work hard to become a great chef one day," Marco said with an emotional voice. He paused, looking at Stefano, Julia, and Anna with gratitude. "And thank you to all of you who believed in me. You changed my life." Applause filled the room, loud and warm, while tears of joy slid down the faces of many present, including Anna, Stefano, and Julia. Marco had found not only a home and a family, but also a purpose and a future full of promise. When the restaurant lights dimmed and guests began to leave, Marco felt enveloped by a peace and happiness he had never known before. He knew that, with the support of his new family and his mother, he would be able to face any challenge and pursue his dreams. For Marco, the restaurant was more than just a workplace. It had become his home, his refuge, and the place where he had discovered who he really was. With this awareness, Marco felt ready to face whatever the future held for him. And so, Marco's journey continued, full of hope, love, and the promise of a bright future. If the story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and check out the other touching stories. See you next time.